area that I think we need to carefully look at, to say how are those policies responding to the needs of SMEs. There are so many things that go into that policy making itself. Are the SMEs involved in making those policies? Are they invited to the table to say, we want to make policies about SMEs? We want to make policies that are going to regulate startups. But are the SMEs themselves involved in that process? Probably that's another area that also we need to look at properly. If they are involved, how is the involvement? How much are they held? I remember the commissioner yesterday that maybe SMEs and also to join politics, to be at the table. Maybe that's one route, but I think we can explore all further routes that are available. But I think the magic word is that there has to be involvement of SMEs themselves when it comes to solving this issue of information challenges. Why their involvement is important is that they will know how best and what is best for them. I'll give another example. I am a policy maker myself. That's my daily bread and butter. But what I've discovered is that a policy that I suggest coming from and where it is going. So that's an important element that we need to consider. So if we solve the issue of information asymmetry about SMEs, if we try to see whether the policies are conducive enough for SMEs, I think we are going to solve the challenge that we have. Now, I'm only going to suggest one solution going forward. We are talking in a youth pavilion, and what we know is that the youth are tech savvy. Technology is the answer to de-risking SMEs. Technology is the answer in getting more information or bridging this information gap that exists between the SMEs and also the lenders and the bankers. I believe that the solution going forward lies in technology. That too then calls for how much access do SMEs have to technology. But I think there's been so many bright spots in Africa. I know most of you are banking using your phones. You access various services, whether it's government or business, using your phones. I think that has gained ground. Can we therefore, I would want to suggest to you, use similar platform to try to solve this challenge. Again, I think there are so many apps that have been developed. The first one that I came to know of was where you are able to borrow mobile credit on your phone. If you have run out of credit, your phone provider is able to provide you with extra credit on your phone that can take you learning. How do they do that? They have developed those apps that are able to read how you buy your credit, and they know that you are going to pay back that credit. Can we therefore use similar methodologies even for accessing of finance? Can the banks, can the venture capitalists use similar methods, building the information about SMEs and then thereafter moving on to make sure that SMEs are able to access similar facilities? I think the word used is fintechs. So it's the fintechs that I think have a solution to the problem that we are grappling with right now. I know in some countries it has already started. I think I have in mind Kenya. I can't remember the specific name of that application, but SMEs are able to borrow small size credits where they're able to get stock. They are able to replenish whatever they are selling in their business using funds that have been borrowed on an app. It's possible. So I think that needs to be expanded, because what that app does is it gathers information. The more you borrow and the more you pay back, the more your credit rating goes higher. So with the use of technology, I believe that we can can deal with SMEs, we can get more information about SMEs and be able to come up with solutions that are specifically tailored to absorb this challenge. So I would like to stop here and also give an opportunity to my colleagues to also come in and comment on the issue that we are handling together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
One, two. There's a moderator. Good morning. Sanbonani. I don't hear, I guess, oh, okay. Oh, I thought you called. Okay. Okay. Good. I think Elizabeth is coming on. The chair is back on.
Well, thank you very much. A very good morning to everyone. If you can hear me, smile to your neighbor. Right. Thank you again, Mr. Charles, for that very elaborate, information, I guess, breakdown of the ecosystem in Africa. I think this is perhaps one of my most dear topics to discuss when it comes to funding SMEs and really encouraging the growth and stability as well as the infrastructure of the ecosystem in Africa with regards to the startups. The youth entrepreneurs on the continent have shown so much resilience over the past couple of years, in spite of even the challenges that Mr. Charles has very well already described and explained. This year alone, I want to kind of just give you all a little bit of background information just to the growth of the startup ecosystem in 2021 and even in the recent years. So during the pandemic, we all know that the global economy took quite a hit. But what's interesting to note is that the ecosystem in Africa, the startup ecosystem in Africa, actually grew quite tremendously. Staggering amount of funding went into the ecosystem in this year alone. And the figures, just to put things into perspective, is that in 2021 alone, and this is a number that we're still up right now and counting, the startup ecosystem in Africa have raised over 2.8 billion US dollars in funding. And this is through VC funding. We're not looking at grants, we're not looking at angel investment, we're looking at specifically VC funding that has gone into the African ecosystem. Now, I want to kind of really bring this up to how does this all fit into what is the role of our governments? What is the role of the other stakeholders on the continent? Because if we do look at it, a lot of the funding that we have, that I've already spoken of right now, actually comes from international investment, which is really great because it is testament to tell us that the African ecosystem has shown tremendous growth in terms of innovation, and it shows that our innovation on the continent can attract and is bankable enough to attract international investment. Now, before I introduce the panel of speakers, I did want to just really sort of put these things into perspective, and most specifically looking at certain things that I would love for us to discuss in today's topic, which really comes down to the aspect of funding. Number one would be the challenge of the founders and startups on the continent that they face every day. We have a panel, one of the panel speakers that actually is a startup from all the way in Angola, who will give us a little bit of intro of who they are, what they're doing, and the challenges that they're facing. And we also have on the panel a few venture capitalists, a couple more policymakers, and even international investors. What I want to try to achieve in today's topic is, number one, what are the challenges that early stage startups face when it comes to raising funds, especially when there is an issue of no traction? Number two, What types of fundings are available to the ecosystem right now on the continent? Number three, what is the role of the government and the policymakers that Mr. Charles already mentioned? What role do they play in encouraging the growth of the ecosystem on the continent? And then some of the other challenges like cultural differences, language barriers, and also the issue of visibility. How do we increase visibility of the startup ecosystem and the various other ecosystems? Because the truth of the matter is, when we look at the funding that I just mentioned, we have four economies that have stood out quite significantly. And we're looking at Kenya, Egypt, South Africa, as well as Nigeria. These economies have emerged as the most ecosystem that have received the most funding. But what happens to the Lusophone countries and the other Francophone countries that are being left out? What do we need to do as the investment community in Africa to improve and increase this visibility? So I'm going to stop here and go ahead and start to introduce some of our speakers today. Now we have venture capitalists, we have the startup founders of Telekumbu, as well as some other policymakers. Give me 1 minute as I introduce them. I want to make sure that I have all of the names correctly. First, I will be introducing Professor Iqbal Jazbeh, who happens to be the acting director. He is a man of many hats. Acting director of projects. He's also in the vice chancellor's office at UNISA. We have Telekumbu Rasbridge Mafumo, who is the co-founder of Telekumbu, a fintech startup all the way from Angola. We have Ms. Cecile Bilao, I hope I have pronounced your name correctly as well, from the European Union Commission, and as well as Mr. Robert Sanders, who happens to be from the European Business and Incubators Network. So I'm going to start off with Ms. Cecile, ladies first. If she could please go ahead and introduce herself, tell us a little bit about her role in the ecosystem and what she would think to say with regards to this particular topic in regards to funding for the ecosystem. And then we will go over to Vice Chancellor Ambassador Professor Iqbal, who will also be giving us an introduction of who he is and a little bit about what he thinks about this challenge that we're currently discussing today. Lastly, I would go to Mr. Robert Sanders from the European Business and Incubators Network to give his take. And then last but not least, Mr. Rasbridge. But before I allow this panel of speakers to go ahead and introduce himself, let me please introduce Mr. Tammy Zondi, who is from, sorry, excuse me. Mr. Tammy Zondi, who happens to be one of the first speakers that I would like to give a little bit of his input with regards to exactly what his thoughts are on this issue. Over to you, Mr. Tammy.
Good morning, everyone. To our moderator, we must be thankful to technology. And funny enough, we are talking financing innovation. I need to take this off. It's hot in this room. I just hope my mic is not inside my coat. So yeah, I was just saying it's quite interesting that we have to talk about financing innovation, which is the core of today's topic, looking at startups and SMMEs. And just before we even start, and obviously having been in this bad time that we got into as the world of the pandemic, but we can all attest to the fact that we have now been acclimatized to living and doing things through technology as it is today, since our moderator is in Malaysia and we are seated here. I do hope that we'll bear with each other wherever there are glitches, because it is expected that such would happen. I also noticed that, even some of the panel members she did not mention, but I think as we go along, you will also be given more information, Ms. Moderator. But with that being said, let me get straight to the topic. I was asked to do just an overall presentation, and then your different experts then to come and give in input from where they come from in terms of their different expertise. I work as the director for youth economic empowerment here in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. So I'm part of the provincial government for those who are coming from outside, and mine is to make sure that youth in the province is part and parcel of economic growth and development. And as it has been said, the name is Tami, surname is Zondi. Now, we can never talk about youth economic empowerment and leave the issues of finance out. Because in essence, without taking much time, if we are to, at a layman's being economic active, there's two ways. It's either you are employed or self-employed. Now, if you are self-employed, that means you are in business. And as it was said yesterday in other panels that we've been through, even during the opening, we had our youth keynote panel. One of the speakers was talking about the key factors of production. So amongst those, whether you studied economics or not, but we know that basic factors of production will include finance. Now the reality is that there's something that I call the core system of businesses, without which businesses will not survive or exist. And finance is one of them. It's worse when we're talking SMMEs and in particular young people, because then the issue is where and how do you get that finance? Again, in the interest of time, one tries to simplify and keep things to the point here. Across Africa, and maybe particular in terms of our learnings in South Africa or the world at large, you'll find that mostly when you're talking business finance, you are talking business loans, you're talking equity finance, and in this day and age, and given where we're coming from as a continent, different countries, we're also in an era of grants, mostly from the public sector, where government is supposed to give in, various grants. That's just, keeping it at a basic level. I say, when I'm joking in other platforms, it seems as if we are living in the age of funds and grant products, because every day you hear there's this fund there. I'm not sure if that's the case in other countries, but every day when you wake up, there's a fund for this, fund for that. Whereas with COVID having happened, there are different funds that are coming up. We're living in an era of fund. Just to in KZN, the MEC was addressing here yesterday, he spoke of the youth fund. Tomorrow, the Minister of Small Business Development in South Africa, Ms. Stella Ndabeni, is launching the Youth Change Fund, which is a national fund. She's going to be launching that here next door. And I'm sure such things are happening in different parts of the continent. Now, if we are living in this age of funds and grants, and as the speaker before me talked about that, people always say it's not a lack of finance that is an issue, but it's how do we access it. As we have these grants and funds, the question is, how effective and efficient, and that's where the effective and efficient the access thereof is, and that's where innovation really comes in. But there is no way we can speak innovation and talking to you as young entrepreneurs, as youth entrepreneurs, and leave out the whole issue of fintech. Because once you start, yes, we're moving from an element of access to finance, of accessing all these grants, all these funds that our government is doing, and hopefully the private sector as well joining in and coming in with various grant models. Because government cannot do it on their own. The question is, or rather, we cannot leave out the issue of fintech. And that's where, again, we are looking up to you as youth SMMEs, as youth startups, in whichever category that you are. We are looking at you to say you come up with these solutions. Now, within the fintech space, we need to ask ourselves a couple of questions. If whatever products that are being offered, whether it's a grant or a business loan or equity finance, is it easy for SMMEs or for you to access that? So if we do not have tech products that are allowing us to do that, we have not innovated enough. the safety of us doing that. I mean, overall, I mean, whether it's accessing finance or just doing a transaction online, the issue of safety when you're talking finances and doing things online becomes very important. And again, the point that I've already spoken on, the issue of effectiveness and efficiency. Now, the most important one, where I want to quickly come in, do we have apps and systems that are allowing us to simplify application processes for startups and SMMEs? Because if we were to talk so many, different geographic areas, from townships to rural areas to urban areas, the issue is, do we have systems? Are we innovating? Are we innovative enough to be able to come up with systems that will enable us to have easy access? Now, we can wait as young people for big corporates and professors and people high up there to come up with these solutions. Entrepreneur, you are an innovator. So these solutions will need to come from us. Having said that, I was listening to the commissioner yesterday when he was speaking about being a dreamer. And I was reflecting that most people and most of us who regard ourselves as leaders tend to dream. We all know of the American leader Martin Luther King, who once said, "I have a dream." As I looked at this topic, I began to say, with the exposure that I have in some of the African countries and in-depth exposure of the South African system, the funding system of SMMEs and youth startups, when are we going to start to have a dream of saying, if we are hosting fairs like IATF, working with the likes of the AU Commission, when are we having the African Union Youth Fund? What is stopping us? Because each of our governments is able to start their own funds in their little corner. Surely, when the opening was happening just the other day, head of states were there. They gather in the African Union. Surely they have the power, but they will not do it perhaps unless you as young people are raising a voice of saying, yes, in our different countries, something is happening, but we believe that at a continental level, something can happen. Fortunately enough, or funny enough, some of these things are already documented somewhere. But the issue is, when are we beginning to implement them? And I want to draw to a close in an interest of time. One of the challenges that we have is this issue of us and them. One of the things when we're doing fairs like this, yes, the focus is trade. Yes, the focus is commerce. But we need to begin to see ourselves as Africans. And we need to begin to say the products that we have. It happened just now with the COVAX Fund. Our countries and the continent was able to come together and be able to do a fund that is able to enable all of us to be able to access vaccines. How much more is important the issue of having viable and lively economic systems in our different countries, and more so with young people being active and at the forefront of that. And it is through the AU, it is through the likes of your African Bank, it is through the likes of your Continental Free Trade Agreement Area Secretariat that we will be able to do that. But again, when it comes to innovation, it will have to be you as young entrepreneurs who are at the forefront. Where we stand as government, as different partners, I think where we are, just the existence of such fairs shows that we are already willing and are already collaborating, but we are waiting upon you as well to innovate. Now, my parting shot will be, if we are, in fact, it's not an if, when, I'd love to see a day when the African Youth Business Development Fund is implemented. And I'm sure this could be one of the things that are documented coming out of IATF in South Africa, that we want this African fund so that we are able to also bridge the gap in terms of our economic divide as different countries. But for that to happen, as my parting shot, is that, one, all the African Union countries need to collaborate. Obviously, we need our head of states to take that bold decision and be able to even pronounce and start talking on the commitment of the amount of capitalizing such a fund. But most importantly, the 2 points that I'll end with as I sit down. We can have these funds, we can even have a continental fund. But if you as young people aren't ready to take them up, it's not that you don't want to, but the issue is, the issue of information that was being spoken to. Are you pushing yourself enough to get as much information as possible? Or you in a corner waiting for a director of youth economic empowerment somewhere to come to you? Are you reading every day? Do you know what happens in Kigali? Do you know what happens in Durban? Or you just heard there's a city called Durban, we're going there, I need a visa, there's IATF. So you need information, because these funds can be there, but if you don't gather enough information, you won't be able to access them. From our end as government, as I end, and private sector, it will then be very important that we set up systems mainly for incubation and mentorship, wherein you as youth startups as well as youth SMMEs, because for me, we also need to see a graduation system. You cannot be startups forever. Being youth does not mean you have only to be startups. You can be an SMME. We know of youth-owned companies that are corporates. So we need to look at that from startups to SMMEs to corporates. Who said we cannot have corporates that are led by young people? Not in our lifetime. It has to happen.
The Director of Youth Economic Empowerment. That was such a powerful speech. Thank you very much. And I think it is so apt for us to recognize the importance of the role of policymakers and really how we can all work together with the ecosystem. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will be going up next to the panel speakers, who I would like to reintroduce once more, just so that we know exactly who they are. I would like to start up with Mr. Lebo Gunguluza from Gunguluza Venture Capital right here in South Africa. I would also like to introduce Ambassador Professor Iqbal Jahzbai, Acting Director of Projects, as well as from the Vice Chancellor's Office at UNISA. I would also like to introduce Ms. Cecile Bilal. I do hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. She is from the European Union Commission. Robert Sanders from the European Business and Incubator Network. Mr. Razrich Mafumo, founder of Telecombo FinTech startup from Angola. So I would like to go ahead and introduce Mr. Lebo Gunguluza to give us a little bit of an introduction of who he is and his thoughts from a venture capital perspective on this subject matter. Over to you, Mr. Gunguluza.
I'd like to congratulate Tammy for such a wonderful presentation. Let's give him a big round of applause. Well, my name is Lebo Gunguluza. Dragon's Den. I'm one of the dragons on Dragon's Den, South Africa. But now I've been put under the water, and now I'm a shark. We're shooting Shark Tank now in January, and I think I should give myself a little bit of a round of applause for changing shape. So we are going to be having a lot of young people coming to present their ideas to us so that they can share and we can invest in them. So in Dragon's Den, I invested about 6 million. It was not a lot of money, but it was something as a venture capitalist. But now in Shark Tank, we've got a slightly bigger budget in the organization. So I run a company called Venture-Based Africa. So Venture-Based Africa, we look at tech startups and we invest in them. The idea behind investment is such that it's not free money. We want to have a return on investment. We sweat for that money for us to make it available. So when you present the idea to us, there's certain things that we look at as investors. And I wanted to share those things with everyone so that we become real with each other, right? We don't sell you dreams and say we've got this fund, that fund, and the next minute you think it's free money. We want to make sure that we are going to get the money back 3 times or 10 times. the price, which is why we talk about a 10 times return, which is scalability. And I'll explain to you quickly what we look for. There are 5 things we look for when we're looking to invest in any tech startup. The first thing, we want to see the team. We don't like one-man shows. One-man shows means that we are depending on this one person, and if this one person disappears, we are done. Our money is gone. And we don't like that. We like to know that you have a team behind you, and this team has got a variety of certain skills, has got certain experiences in business that you're trying to put together, and that there's a strong be someone that is your uncle that's a CA. It could be someone that's someone who's got an experience in technology that you know. You put them as an advisory board or a board so that we can trust that there's more people inside your board who are backing you up with experience and possibly connections for money and a strong network so that you are able to build from those people alone. And then in that way, we are confident that our money is safe. So that if we know you disappear, we know we're going to call Uncle Sam and say, Uncle Sam, what happened to Kulegani? Because we know that we've got other people that we can call on should anything happen to you. So that's very, very important, that we want to know that firstly you've got a team, and we prefer that your team has got the necessary skills to build the technology that you are building. Because if you are building a technology as a startup, whether it's an app or an e-commerce store, we don't want to always be paying out and outsourcing to some guy who's outside who later steal your app or your idea. Because if they steal your app or the idea, then what have we invested in? So that takes me to my second point. The second thing that we invest in if it's a tech startup is that we want to know that the IP is yours. We want to know that the technology belongs to you, because that's what we are buying into. Because what else are we buying into if you don't own the technology, if your technology is outsourced? That means we might as well buy into the company that owns the technology and is building the technology. So when you come to us and you say, venture capitalist or dragon investor, here's my idea, we want to know that you've got skin in the game, and we want to know that your team is developing the app, or the company that is an investment, is a partner to you, is party to this idea or product that you're developing. The third thing that we want to know that you're not tackling a want. There's a big difference between a want and a need. If you're tackling a want, it's a problem to us, because that's what people want. We want a need. We want to know that the solution that you are providing, if it's an Uber, if it's Bolt, we want to know that people really need it in that area or in that community. Because we don't want people to have an option, because the issue of scalability comes right there. Because if people want, we know that they're going to talk to the other and tell each other about this product. Because if they don't talk about this product and tell each other about this product, then you're not getting enough adoption for us to trust that your brand or your product will have double-digit growth. We look for double-digit growth. We want to know that there's a 10 times ability for your product to grow. When we talk about 10 times, we mean as follows, that if you have a spaza shop there, or you have a beautiful chisanyama there, your chisanyama is limited only to this target market. But it has not an opportunity to grow beyond borders. That takes me to a target market. That your target market, we're not looking for a target market that's limited to your confines. We're looking for a target market that will go beyond borders, because that's why we're interested in technology when it comes to investments, because we're looking for scalability. That's why it would be difficult for us as venture capitalists not to look for a guy who's got a beautiful chisanyama, because that's 2 times scalability, just in case people really want that chisanyama. But we're looking for someone who's got 10 times scalability, so that if your app blows regionally, other people are going to go to other regions, other provinces, other countries, and tell people that there's an Uber in town, there's this in town, there's this in town. Download and on board. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for that level of scalability. So, but also, more importantly, in your target market, we're looking for a target market that can afford. A target market that can afford, not in the sense that they've got more money, but in the sense that they can grow within each other to afford the basic service that you're offering. So that when it blows up, we know that it's blowing up within that particular target market because the target market can afford it. We don't want an app whereby when someone's trying to download an app, they are even running away from that app because they can't even afford the basic price of that app because the need is not strong enough. The last one is that we want to know that if we invest money in you, that you are a die-hard entrepreneur. You have got so much tenacity that even if challenges are facing you, you're not going to give up because the minute you give up on us, the minute you give up on that project, it means that we've lost our money. I don't know if you get a very good idea of what we look for so that when you present your pitch deck, we're not necessarily interested more in the pitch deck. We're interested in the entrepreneur himself. That's why when we speak on Dragon's Den, we speak about we are buying into the jockey, not necessarily the idea. Because the jockey is what's the driver. And the driver must have a tenacity, even if it means the idea keeps changing. But the driver is going with that change. So that as the environment changes, as the idea changes, because Mark Zuckerberg did not start with Facebook the way it started. WhatsApp did not start where WhatsApp is now. Instagram did not start where Instagram is now. All those things, if you look at their history, they changed from another idea to the idea that they are now. Now, Tammy spoke about a particular app that makes it easy for entrepreneurs to access funding. We've got good news. As Venture-Based Africa, we have developed an app where entrepreneurs can register, and the tech startups can register on that app and find all sorts of VCs, venture capitalists. All you do, you go to Merge. There's an app called Merge. This app is very much like Tinder. Do you know Tinder? Who knows Tinder? Tinder is sort of like a wishy-washy app. I find you, you find me, we fall in love. I don't know if you know that app. So Merge is exactly that. I'm an investor, you're a tech startup, let's find each other. So we have developed that end of last year. It's probably now becoming the fastest growing app in Africa. We have registered over 2,400 VCs already on the app that have onboarded themselves. You can also onboard yourself and find VCs. So Tammy said, let's look for those type of apps and find those solutions. I wanted to say, as Venture Africa, we have made sure we find that solution so that we can benefit you, the African child. You are our priority. I am born to serve you. I am born to help you. I am born by God's grace to be a servant to the African child. What God blesses me with, I transfer to you. And the app that we have developed is just only a platform to make sure that the African child can gain access to funding and capital. Because we know that is the biggest challenge in Africa. I want to salute you for being here today. I want to say that this is the biggest move that you've made. And I want to say that I'm available to assist you. And we have set up at least 1 billion on the fund to make sure we can support you. And we have also set up a 300 million fund to make sure that we support all those organizations that have been hit by COVID, that were doing well, but now they were hit by COVID. We've set up a 300 million fund so that we can assist them out of the mess. I just want to thank you for this opportunity, Tammy, to make sure that we are here to present to you who we are. My name is Lebo Kumuluza. I thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. As an investor, I learned already so much, and I think it's important for me to perhaps maybe reiterate something that I think the youth startups that are in the room today learn from a venture capitalist on the continent. Number one would be As an investor, you need to know that, as a startup, you need to know that when you're receiving investment, it is not into your idea, but it is to you. They are investing in, do you own the IP of the technology that you have created? Do you have a team that works with you in order for you to ensure that this investment can guarantee you or assure a return on investment? Such amazing tidbits to learn from Mr. Lebo Gunguluza. I would love for you to continue to stay. I know that you had mentioned that you may need to leave us, but I do have a few more questions I'd love to ask you as a VC on the continent. But before I do that, let me go ahead and introduce the rest of the panel speakers. First up, I would like to give an opportunity and a warm welcome to Ms. Cecile from the European Union Commission, and as well as Mr. Robert Sanders, as well as even Mr. Rasbridge. Ms. Cecile, please go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what the EU is doing with the African startup ecosystem.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Elizabeth, and good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. It's actually my first trip from Europe for 2 years, something like this, but very happy to be here today and amongst young entrepreneurs and on this very important topic for us. As Elizabeth said, I work for the European Commission, the department in charge of international development, and we are really keen to also work to support the development of young entrepreneurs in Africa. We really see that energy that is there today and all the week here has a really good potential for more development on the continent and to support really the growth and jobs. So we are developing and we are keen to do that programs together that are more relevant for you, the young generation, and also in light of what our speakers are saying, the needs on the continent. Now, I'm also here today online with Robert, and he is in charge of one of our program, which is really developing the incubator and accelerator in Africa, a new program that we are developing, but it's not the only program. We have many, and developed over the year, many different programs to support entrepreneurship in Africa. Probably not enough, and probably too scattered too. And here I really agree with what Charles was saying about this access to information. That also apply to what we are doing as the European Union when we want to support also with programs, Your Energy here on young entrepreneur. It's probably that we do things a little bit too scattered, too little in each of the area and each of our EU member states, like being a program being done by Germany, a program being done by Italy and Spain, and we all do a little bit up there, and maybe you are not enough aware of what exists and where we are there to provide some support. So what we have started to do, and we'll do more as the months are coming, we are putting together a Team Europe initiative, as we call it, meaning we work with all our partners in European Union from the policy side, but also from the private side. So venture capital, impact funds, and business association are involved, and we try to pull our energy together to coordinate, so we have a good overview of what is already existing and how we can make that accessible to you as possible means to support your business. But more than that, we want to boost also the support that we are doing. And so that will really allow to work together, because I think on this one, it's very important too. I know Tamir was making the point also of getting an African Union fund, which is a very good idea indeed. And it's this work together and then getting back to the entrepreneur and to you, so that you know where you can go if you have an idea and you want it to be funded, where you can go. As the EU, really what we try to do is one big thing is access to finance. There are programs, there are impact investment funds, there are venture capital. As the EU, what we can do is to help de-risk the product. So basically, we give guarantees, which means that banks are less scared, so to say, to finance some of you, if you are, especially if you are young, and if you are also a woman, if you're coming from a more fragile country. Of course, here we are in South Africa. The country is already, there's lots of energy, and so on. The country is already maybe more developed. It's maybe easier. Also, I'm sure it's not easy on a daily basis, but to have access to some of the funds that exist. In other countries in Africa, it's much more difficult. So we want to really help there with saying, we are the EU. If you are funding these young people and there is no return to investment and the company doesn't work, we will provide you with the fund, so you wouldn't lose any money. So it will help them really to engage more. So that's what we are already doing, and which we will do more and more, and we'll have new program in this respect. And we will also, next to the access to finance, I think what is very important too is for you, young entrepreneur, to have the right ecosystem there. So to have incubator, accelerator, Robert will talk about it, but more than that, to have like place where you can find training, to develop your own business model, your own things, so that it is really a support to your development as an entrepreneur, and to support your energy in developing your new idea and making them alive and sustainable and successful. So that's what we're trying to do now with this Team Europe Invest in Young Businesses in Africa. And we will have, and I'm really happy to say that we will have in February next year a big summit between the EU and Africa with all your heads of states and our heads of states, where we will put that very high on the agenda. We want to put the young very high there, and to really come up with really clear ideas, clear projects that will really launch this and boost what we're doing on all the support program from young people. We will also have a European Africa Business Forum, where I think it's very important to also make the link between, and I think that was said by Elizabeth, we need international investment, you need some time to be connected with bigger business, and then to make this connection between bigger business and SMEs, to have really supply chains going on. So this will be the place also where we can put also you as young entrepreneur in connection with a bigger business from Europe, if they can support your initiative and support your development as a young enterprise in your country. So with all this, I think we're trying to also listen to what are your needs, what are your barriers, what you need more to come up from us, and that's why this is good to be here today, and to continue this discussion, especially in the context of our EU-Africa summit and the business platforms that we will have next to it. Maybe just one also comment that I think Charles made the point, which is very important, that as a small business, of course, you need the right business climate or the right condition, also from a perspective, to really start a business. And I think this is very important to have that and to work on that. Also from a EU perspective, we are also very keen to put energies in funding business who are taking into account the green, the digital dimension. This is the top priority of the EU. I'm sure you've seen things around like this, but it's true that we see that as a business in a sort of very sustainable manner. Shape your business is really to give it a green dimension, a digital dimension. Here, I'm eager to hear about all this energy and many projects that are there, but I can guarantee that at the EU we are committed to support as much as we can from our perspective the dynamic that is taking place on this continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cecile. While we are on with the EU, I think I would like to go ahead and give Mr. Robert Sanders the opportunity to go ahead and discuss and perhaps give us a little bit more info on what they are doing with the Accelerator Network and Incubator Network from the EU. Mr. Sanders,
thanks
online?
Very much.
Great.
I
there
hope
you go.
you hear me. We've got the technology working. It's great to be with you this morning. Sincere apologies I can't be there in person, but hope to come next time. And as was said, we are a network of incubators and accelerators mainly based in Europe. And our members focus on supporting startups and scale-ups and helping them in their aim to become fully fledged SMEs. And of course, an important part of that work is access to finance. And certainly I would agree, company entrepreneurs all over the world have the same problem. Often capital is out there, and the question is, how can they link to the capital? And a lot of work that
where are you putting those pictures?
To really help startups prepare for these investor readiness type opportunities, and to make sure that when they go into the Dragon's Den and other type environments, They're ready to go, and they are really able to present their business models in an effective way, which will hopefully attract the investment. And as Cecile was saying, we are also working with the EU. We have received a grant to help support some capacity enhancing activities for incubators and accelerators in Africa. And we are going to also join these incubators with some of our members around Europe, because we believe there's a lot of value in exchanging between incubator managers how best to support companies. So this project is called BIC Africa. And at the moment, we are working in 4 pilot countries, which are Angola, Ethiopia, Madagascar, and Somalia. And as you were saying, Elizabeth, sometimes we need, I think, to have visibility in other countries, apart from the ones that we know have very well-developed ecosystems. And certainly the idea is with the EU to extend this program and to include other countries. So the EU has given funding of around about 5 million euros for each country project in the 4 countries I mentioned. And the idea is to strengthen and build the incubator and accelerator ecosystem there, and to help startups meet the right experts. So we know, for example, in Europe, through our network, over €1 billion of funding was raised for about 10,000 companies through the work that some of our innovation centers have done. So it is a formula that works. And also part of our work in the next coming 4 to 5 years, working with incubators and startups across these 4 countries and beyond, is to offer connections to Europe, because we're all aware that there is a huge interest, I think, between the AAU and in the EU, and we sit certainly from our level from the startups and the companies. There's huge interest now to make these connections, and that's been developing over the last 4 or 5 years. So part of our work will be to bring accelerators, but also client company startups to Europe to explore some commercial opportunities, so access to markets, access to finance, access to partners. And so we're really excited in our small way in helping to build this innovation bridge between Africa and Europe, because we think in terms of the market, there is huge potential. So we're very looking forward to working with all of you. I'd just like to introduce, actually, I have my colleague Darwit, who's actually with us today. So Darwit, perhaps you could sort of stand up and wave to everybody. And as time is short, Darwit's around all day. So if there are any questions you'd like to ask about BIC Africa, about how we as a tool supported by the EU, we've been working across Africa, we'd be very happy to exchange with you. We're a non-profit organization ourselves. We have a mission and vision to work across the board with everybody. And so we're very interested to meet all sorts of organizations, from startups themselves to incubators to policymakers. So we're very pleased to present BIC Africa today. We're also doing a small sponsoring activity at this event. We are sponsoring some of the prizes that are being awarded to the startup in the competition for this event. So we're very proud and happy to do that. And again, in a small way, some direct financing, I think, will help as well. So thanks, Elizabeth. That's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. That was wonderful. And I would just like to add on what you said, just the importance of accelerator programs and incubators, how important they are to really enhance the development of startups, to make them investment ready. One of the challenges that I would like to point out is Invest, which happens to be the company that I run. We are an African-focused investment advisory firm out in Asia, and we also run a female tech founder accelerator program for female founders on the continent, as well as out here in Asia. And one of the things that we found as we started to run this program is the huge difference between Asian startups versus African startups, just the lack of knowledge that is out there on the continent. And I think to see more international players come into the space and encourage and work directly with the hubs on the continent, this is very exciting. So thank you again, Robert, as well as to Cecile, for all of your contribution. I would like for us to move on because of our time. Next up, I would love to go ahead and introduce Professor.
Time and welcome to my hometown. I know many of you all have traveled to Durban corners of the world, and my hearty congratulations to many of you here who have who've been awarded the AU Startup Awards, and many of the young entrepreneurs in the room. And it was good to see earlier on here the chair of the AE Trade Forum, Mr. Seyum. And it was also good to see the organizer, Ms. Treasure Mapanga. The good thing is when you have to speak last and in a short way, you can build on what has been already said and pull all of it together, hopefully in an innovative and try to be as creative as Charles, as Tami, Robert, Cecile, Lebo, and also try to match the comments made by our chair, Elizabeth, this afternoon. So what I'm going to do is just give you some of the key tried and tested lessons learned over time, and I believe those tried and tested principles which have to be interfaced with a very uncertain, with a big changing world, to do so in the best way possible. The first one is the lessons I've seen in East Africa, I've seen in South Africa with entrepreneurs. We've seen it in many parts of Europe as well and other parts of the world. You know, we speak about different ideological systems, a democracy, a theology-cracy, a sort of autocracy. You have autocratic systems. But I think the idea of networking, one could term it as a netocracy. The question of your network as young entrepreneurs, as big businessmen, and how they are able to engage with each other at the very simple human level. Because often, when you would have a very benign discussion with one of the young entrepreneurs or the experienced entrepreneurs here, at some point in your life, a particular idea may not have been relevant at that point, but as you apply your business principles, the principles of entrepreneurship, you would find it becoming very relevant at that point. You may pick up a business card from a UNDP representative here who serves in Lesotho, for example, or serves in another part of the world. And then at some point in applying your business, you could give that person a call, and many of them, you know, would in a very pleasant, voluntary way be willing to share ideas with you. And you could see how you could apply it in that. So the principle of networking, what I call the netocracy, as you engage with, for example, the Afri-Exim Bank, the co-sponsors of this event, the IATF event. I mean, they are now the main underwriters of the COVID vaccines of the AU in Africa. So the Johnson & Johnson plant here in the Eastern Cape is now the biggest producer of Johnson & Johnson vaccines for the global market. But when a government agency orders from this Eastern Cape plant the vaccine, the Afri-Exim Bank is extending the finance to the governments to buy those vaccines, those Johnson & Johnson vaccines from the Eastern Cape plant. It's called the Aspen Institute plant. So the Afri-Exim Bank has shown that you can come up with the right instruments to underwrite the financing, the wellness, the business success of projects on our continent. And the Afri-Exim Bank has fascinating partners. The EU Development Bank, other banks within the continent, the South African Development Bank in Johannesburg, Midrand, which underfunds and underwrites mainly infrastructure projects. So you would be able to find, with the right network, and I think as our Tami mentioned early on, the South African government will be launching that youth fund tomorrow, right? That's right. So there are many instruments to fund the projects. And I think a very important point, which we discovered over the past 2 years and with the COVID debacle and crisis, but every crisis has a silver lining. And the silver lining was that President Ramaphosa took a firm view that the manufacturing capabilities on our continent must come back on track. We can't say on the basis of scalability that our vaccines must be produced elsewhere outside of this continent. Because if one day they don't like you, for whatever reason, and they just decide to stop the tap on the meningitis vaccine, for example, or the polio vaccine, what are you going to do? Yeah? So I can see this trend is growing within our continents, and our partners, the EU, in South Africa and in other parts of the continent, are coming around this, that it has to be a partnership based on equality, yes, because both sides have much to offer on the table. So netocracy. The second issue has been covered, the issue of digital fast tracking. I'll just give you one or two quick examples. Last year, most of the South African universities were closed under very stringent lockdown conditions. But the University of South Africa, the largest and the oldest in this country, 148 years old, it conducted electronic digital online exams for 250,000 students. It was the only university able to do so because it had the digital IT infrastructure. And then they also came up with an app to invigilate students. So through that app, the headquarters of UNISA, the University of South Africa, has access to your laptop, to the mic, to genuinely see that it is either Robert or Cecile who's writing that exam, or Rima, and it's not somebody else writing that exam, and they have access to the mic. And that app was developed between UNISA and Oxford University, like that vaccine which was done between Oxford University and Wits University in Johannesburg. So the capability is here on this continent, and the pockets of excellence are there on the issue of digital fast tracking. I can just give you one quick example. Because the University of South Africa, sorry I'm biased because I'm serving in the Vice Chancellor's office there, and The good thing, it took the University of South Africa, the oldest university, 148 years to nominate and appoint for the first time a woman vice chancellor and principal, Prof. Puleng Lenkabula, and she's from Lesotho. Yeah? So the point being is that there are amazing pockets of excellence in this continent to lead. You could hear more from Prof. Puleng Lenkabula tomorrow. She will be speaking on this very same podium. I think in the morning it's the former Nigerian president, Obasanjo, at 9 o'clock. And in the afternoon at 5 o'clock will be the UNISA Vice Chancellor, Prof. Puleng Lenkabula. Yeah, the quick example I was going to give about UNISA, I went as a visiting professor to SOAS in London. I think many of you all know SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies. I can assure you the UNISA Electronic Digital Library was better than any UK library. UNISA subscribes to all the academic journals, the Economist Intelligence Unit, all their reports, the economic reports, and what have you. So the hint is, if you're a UNISA student, and if you're not, enroll, it'll be well worth having access to that huge digital database. Now, because of issues of the fact that it's the largest university with some 400,000 students, so it has the type of funding to have a very strong digital electronic library. So you could, even on your mobile phone, check for the book on the UNISA app there, and if you locate it, you can download it on PDF or whichever format you would like to do so. The third point is, when you look at the very successful Somali mobile phone companies within our continent, or if you look at the successful Eritrean migrant community in South Sudan or Uganda, and you ask yourself the question, how is it that a migrant who comes with virtually very little to a country like South Africa, to Johannesburg and Durban, and they in a very quick time, within a year or two, can go up the ladder very quickly in business. This solidarity amongst communities, the collective pooling of resources, a group of Somali young entrepreneurs and elderly entrepreneurs will put together, say, 2 million rands to buy flour or cooking oil. And they're able in the townships, in the corner shops, to sell that product much cheaper than any other competitor. And if you look more closely, and you should ask yourself, in all the Somali towns, why is it the mobile phone rates are the cheapest on this continent? And you'll see they work on small margins, but big volume. Yeah? They know Somalis like talking. I think you remember Churchill said, Joe is better than war, you know? So the mobile phone companies make a lot of money from that. So I think this idea of collective pooling of financing resources, I mean, I've seen this in my own community. When Mahatma Gandhi graduated in law and was asked to come to Durban to fight a law case here against the apartheid government, he pulled a group of people in the community. If you do get a chance, you can take this and visit the heritage route. You'll see he had a farm there in Phoenix. And he tried to apply some of the socialist community principles, like Cuba does in medicine and in other fields as well. So this very simple, tried and tested principle of collective pooling of resources has been proven Somali origin, and many of them are very open to partnering. I recall the Mandela Foundation at one point ended up doing a workshop with the Somali entrepreneurs at the University of Johannesburg to share experiences as to how this Somali template of small business is more successful than ever before. So this is worth looking at. Now, if you look at Cuba, or let me ask the question, why is it that its medical system is better than the Canadian Index in Medicines, the health standards in Canada? So they came up with indigenous medical systems, and they could send a huge battery of doctors to West Africa to deal with Ebola, that it prompted the New York Times to acknowledge, despite the US sanctions on Cuba, that they did a good job. You can't deny that they did a good job. So it's worth looking at that medical training system. Even from our 9 provinces in South Africa, students go to Cuba for medical training. And of course, in concluding, when dealing with these 3 areas of netocracy and networking, the digital fast tracking in life, the analytics of life, and coming up with a new epistemic and a new approach to business, and the whole idea of collecting, pooling with business people. I'm trying to keep this mic here from falling. Anyway, the reality of life is we will all go through the ups and downs, the pros and cons. But of course, like a marathon runner, I know you are able to pace yourself. You are able to know how to navigate. And thank God to GPS systems and Google Maps now, and Waze and other assistant apps in technology. It makes life much more easier now. So when you tweet something about your business venture or something on Twitter, you are able to go onto that tweet under analytics and get to see who has read it, who is more interested than others, whether on the media level, on the business level, and the names of the people who have liked your tweet as well. And you can then start a possible conversation with the person you feel you would like to approach. And in that way, I believe the past 2 years under COVID's circumstances have shown us the resilience of young business, of entrepreneurs on this continent. And as I mentioned to you, this Johnson & Johnson plant, the CEO spoke here a few days ago, in front of those 7 excellencies, the presidents who were here. And he said that he runs this vaccine plant. For him, the economic index is 2 humorous things. He says when the economy is very brisk in South Africa or other parts of the world, he knows he's going to sell more Viagra, that blue pill. When people are very energetic and excited, his company is going to sell more Viagra, right? That well-known Pfizer blue pill. And he says when the people are feeling depressed, then they are going to take antidepressants from his same company, yeah? Of course, he said this in a humorous way, but the lessons in between of what he was saying applies to entrepreneurship as well. Thank you, and I think it would be useful to have a 2-way conversation under Q&A. Thank you.
Big thank you to Professor Iqbal. I think the lesson here is, for me, what I learned really from such his poignant statements was, why do we need to reinvent the wheel when we already have the principles already back home? I think if Africa is able to pick up on that and learn from the already existing methods, we have from crowdfunding platforms that we see today, we already have seen that within our own small communities, we have organizations that have been built from raising funds within our small communities. All we need to do is to digitize those methods and make them global and as well as regional in order for us to have access to the funding that we are discussing today. Thank you again, Professor Iqbal. Last but not least, I would really like to give a warm welcome. I think we've heard from the venture capitalists, we've heard from the policymakers, we've heard from the professor. But I think what's important for us in today's conversation is to actually hear about the people that are most affected by this topic, which is the startups themselves, you and I that are in this room today. And we're very happy to have Mr. Rasrich Mafumo, who happens to be the founder of an early stage startup in Angola called Telekumbo. I will allow him to give us a little bit of introduction about who he is, tell us a little bit about Telekumbo, what they're doing in Angola, as well as the challenges that they're facing with regards to financing that we are discussing here. Thank you again. Go ahead, Mr. Rasrich.
Okay, good afternoon, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the organizers of this program, all stakeholders, Elizabeth, our coordinator, for inviting us to tell our story as Telekumbo. On behalf of Telekumbo, I would like to say we are honored. I came with one of our team members. Her name is Perseverance Mzea. She's here with us. I'll ask her to stand just to wave to the people as part of our delegates. Okay, so I'm here to tell the story, behind the story for Telekumbo. Okay, Telekumbo is a startup that was founded in March 2021, this year. The story starts like this. Once upon a time, I left Zimbabwe in March 2020, to explore opportunities in Angola. Before I went to Angola, some of my friends have succeeded or have made that economy succeed. We don't want to be partakers, we don't want to champion, to be pioneers, to solve problems in such countries. So me, I took it as a welcome opportunity to go and seek opportunities. So we, luckily, we discovered our opportunity in fintech, financial technology, hence Telekumbo. Telekumbo simply, it's a company, it's the name Kumbo, it means money, it's slang for money in Angola. In Angola, they of course, they speak mostly Portuguese, but Kumbo is the local language there, hence the name Telekumbo. Okay, so who are the co-founders of Telekumbo? I will introduce the team. Start by myself, of course, Rasrich Mafumo. I have got a finance degree. I was born and bred in Zimbabwe. I grew up in Zimbabwe most of my life. I've traveled, of course, to several other countries like South Africa. I've been here before, Angola, Zambia, and Malawi. Those are the countries that I've visited so far in Southern Africa. Okay, why did we choose Angola? Is because, sorry, I will explain that later on. Let me finish with the team. Then we've got Perseverance Mzea, one of our team members. She's also a finance graduate herself. She's going to be helping us with the business development and the likes. Absent are two of our co-founders. One is Angolan, and the other is also Zimbabwean. Is our software engineer named Kudzi. He's the one who developed the application. I'm disappointed one of the presenters was here. He was mentioning that they would like to invest in companies where owners own their IP address, and I was going to tell him that we also own our IP address, but it's fine. Okay, so why did we choose fintech? Well, in Africa, it's an untold story. We have heard of successful fintech companies globally, mostly in the West and maybe in the East. You can think of countries like, you can talk of Mark Zuckerberg, you talk of Steve Jobs, you talk of Jack Ma. Those are the names that come to mind. But it seems that sometimes we rarely hear our stories of our own Africans. If you ask even the Africans themselves, tell us the story about the co-founders in Africa. The co-founders, you know, generally, they talk about the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Steve Jobs. So I would want to encourage our fellow African youths that we need to tell our own story and we need to champion that. So why do we choose fintech in Angola? Number one, I'll just give a few reasons, but there are plenty. On my pitch deck, I actually mentioned 15 reasons why an investor can choose to invest in Angola, but I'll just mention the 5 key ones. Number one, it is simply a virgin market. Believe it or not, when I stepped to Angola last year in March, there was no mobile money service in the country. I was actually surprised because I thought since the launch of M-Pesa in Kenya in 2007, by 2020, almost all African countries will be having financial services, but it's something that actually intrigued me and excited me. Number two, Angola is a typical third world country where other previous startups have succeeded. We can talk of Zimbabwe, my own country, EcoCash, I'm sure you know it. Then of course we can talk of the mother of all financial services, M-Pesa in Kenya. The third reason, I believe is the time is ripe in Angola. If you go there, it's 60% of the population are unbanked, and it is believed over 80% are informally employed. So that is conducive environment for a successful mobile money, because most of them, they're not banking with formal banks. So we want to, with our goals of financial inclusion, it is important that those people can also be included in the economy. The fourth reason, National Bank of Angola and the Angolan government also promoting digital payments innovation since 2018. So there's a drive with the Angolan government to promote digital payments, digital platforms. So we kind of came in the right time. The fifth reason, Angola is a country of 32 million in population. It's a big market potential, as you can see, twice the population of Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, we've got 3 mobile money service operators who are operating feasibly. So double that in a virgin market, you've got a huge potential market. So one of our panel speakers here, he mentioned Martin Luther King. Thank you. You stole the thunder. He kind of stole the thunder there. I'd already put that as a quote as well. Okay. He mentioned that he had a dream, which is one of our legendary speeches we talk about. Well, I have a dream myself to see African youths everywhere champion startup revolution, not only in the big 5. You know, in Africa we talk of Kenya, we talk of Ghana, South Africa, Nigeria, and Egypt when it comes to fintech. But I believe there are so many Africans out there who are just lacking exposure, who are also having innovative ideas, whether in fintech or any other sector, so that it's not only about fintech. But personally, I'm a fan of fintech, so today we focus more on fintech. Okay, so I have a dream myself to see African youths every champion a startup revolution, none ever. You know, create jobs, speed economic development. We want to groom creators rather than consumers. I once read a book that was saying Africans are mostly consumers, they are rarely innovators. To a certain extent, it's true. So I believe with the current generation, the digital generation, the youths, this is the ball is in our court. We need to be partakers of this. Okay, so what challenges have we faced is Telekumbu, obviously, the one that we're talking about, financing. It's very difficult to source funding from investors, especially if you're a startup. With regards to our project, they mention things like licenses. Since we are going to be more into telecoms industry, though it's financial services, but it's merged with telecoms, because our application, it's a USSD-based payment platform, because we are targeting even those without smartphones. So with that, you need to merge, you need to be strategically aligned to telecoms in several countries. For Angola, there are mainly 2, Unitel and Movicel. So those are the companies that we are going to deal with upon seeking the license as required by the investors. Also, they want to see, they usually ask for an income statement for the last 2-3 years. I'm sure that's the basic one. So that is difficult for most startup people, youth, to present and avail. Why? Because they would want to actually start that. Okay, so they also ask some of the limitations also includes when you're pitching, some of the audience potential investors, some of them they want small pitch decks, Some of them, they want large ones. They say it's not detailed enough. So it's something that you need to balance, probably research before you do your presentation about your investors. But that's basically it. The story is of financing. It's really about any other thing than financing. So this is the challenge that I feel most African entrepreneurs faced, like ourselves. Our product is ready to go live, Telekumbu. We actually registered our company this year in March. It took us almost a year. I think the pandemic also played a part, because when I arrived in Angola last year in March, end of March, that's when we had COVID had already started in that country specifically. So it also derailed our progress, but we still soldiered on because we had a vision, we had a goal, which is what I want to leave our youths in Africa, those present and those listening virtually. Problems will always be there, so we need to find solutions as youth to pursue our visions without excuses. Someone says we can have excuses or we can have results, but you can never have both. I believe that to be a true statement. So I once read a statement online or in a book, I've forgotten. It says this: let China sleep, for if she wakes up, she will shake the world. I would like to echo the same for Africa, but I will change a little bit. I won't say let Africa sleep, because it's no longer time to sleep. Let Africa awaken, for when Africa realize their full potential, we will shake the world. Thank you very much.
Very beautifully said. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the resilience of the African startup. In spite of the pandemic, in spite of the challenges, whether it is policy, whether it is environment instability, we see a startup like Telekumbu rise above and continue to show themselves worthy in the face of adversity, as well as in the face of these challenges. Now, I would like to open the floor to questions. And as we are preparing for that, I would like to also ask the moderators that are already seated, the panel speakers that are already seated, a few questions that I would like based on some of the things that they mentioned today. Now, before we go into the questions Q&A session, audience, I would like for you to know that Bulelwa, who is, I think I would love for her to raise her hand and just wave to you so you can know. She will be going around with the mic and ensure that you're able to ask your question. Please keep your questions very brief, succinct, and straight to the point so that we can actually get a move on. Now, the first question that I have is actually specifically directed to some of the policymakers that mentioned. Mostly to Mr. Tammy Zondi, as well as to Mr. Charles. I do hope that they're both still seated. But I would like to understand a little bit more with regards to how we can actually integrate and work directly with the startup ecosystem, as well as with the policymakers like yourselves. We have seen a few startup acts that are starting to show up in a few of the countries. I know South Africa currently has one. Nigeria recently recently launched their Startup Act, and a few other countries that are starting to do so. This is a great initiative that we're starting to see, that we are now starting to see government make steps or take steps in ensuring that they work hand in hand with the startup ecosystem. But here's another challenge that we're seeing. As much as these ecosystems, as well as these startup acts that are being implemented, we're still seeing that some policies are starting to stifle innovation on the continent. An example of this is in Nigeria, where we have over 200 fintech, the hub of fintech startups on the continent. But we've seen that policymakers, as well as even the Central Bank of Nigeria, has sort of stifled the ecosystem in that manner. What can the policymakers do to really encourage growth and development of the startup ecosystem? I'll hand it over to either of you to answer this question.
Hello. Sorry, Elizabeth. Can you just repeat the last part of what you had said?
My apologies. Did you not hear me well?
Yeah, this is the last part.
What can our policymakers do to work closely with the startup ecosystem in order to enhance development and growth within the ecosystem.
Yep. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that very appropriate question. And as I was hinting in my three major points, the issue of partnerships, the idea of partnering with young entrepreneurs, startups. The good thing is that in many parts of the world, there is a firm acknowledgement that you have to do so, including South Africa. And I believe most governments are doing so, most policymakers are doing so. Of course, many of the youth startups would probably critique some of the government policies, some of the AU Commission policies, that they would love this to go more faster, more quicker. I think in that regard, many of the traditional skills of lobbying, of mobilizing, have to be put into motion. Because we all know, whether it's the AU, the EU, or whether it's any policy-making unit, even at the university, for example, it's only by the feedback from the different constituencies and the type of friendly and at times even pressured engagement that policymakers move fast. And so I think in the world where you have the amazing digital means of communication and expressing one's view, now, and policymakers have an account on Instagram because even they know to promote their products, if they don't know what is going on there, they wouldn't be able to pitch and see the success of the advancement and the promotion of their products. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Can I have the mic? I think I have it. Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Yes, I think the word that we can use for what is happening is disruption. What is happening is that startups, technology, and innovation have brought disruption to the traditional methods that have been used over centuries in regulating the economic environment, whether it's in Africa or in the rest of the world. So I would say that somehow with that disruption, the government has been caught back foot. They are running towards what is happening. The changes and the technology are going on a faster pace than how the government machinery works. So it is that type of gap which is there, which I think has caused this discomfort, especially among the policymakers as well as the regulators in government. A new product comes in the market, immediately it's introduced, they don't know how to regulate that program. The best solution which is there is just to block it for them, instead of engaging in a dialogue and trying to see how best they can handle that. So I'll give an example. I think it was in Kenya when the former M-Pesa came in. The government was struggling to say, is it a bank? Is it not? How do we regulate it that? So I think we need to sit back, as I said in my introductory remarks, to have that consultation and conversation between the government and the fintechs, the government and the startups, to say, what is it? How best can we handle this? I think that's how we are going to build policy solutions that are going to support and develop the startup community and the startup ecosystem. Policies that will be able to support the growth of this. As you have clearly seen, most of them are solving the daily challenges that a normal African faces. So that dialogue needs to take place between the private sector, SMEs, startups, and the government. And together they need to roll back and sit But if these two, the regulations and the startups, don't talk, we are going to continue to face this environment. Now, I just want to build in 1 minute another point which was raised during the discussions that we just had. It was the issue of coming together. As startups, as SMEs, I think there's need that we come together. When we come together, what that's going to do is that we are going to have one large voice than a singular SME or a single startup sitting somewhere in a corner in a continent, whether it's in Kenya, Ghana, South Africa. Your voice would not be held that higher. But we have been talking about dreams. Me too, I have a dream of seeing startups as you are here. I understand there are 150 of you. Can you come up with some sort of association? Can you come up with an environment or a network that the professor talked about, where you can exchange ideas? Can you come up to share information, to say, this is what is happening in this corner, this is how our regulations are being done? It is through that exchange of experience and coming together, advocating for common goals, that your voice is amplified and you are able to be heard by the government. So that's how I would tackle that question, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both Professor Iqbal as well as Mr. Charles. My next question is one that is quite close to my heart, which, as much as it is just about entrepreneurship and financing startups on the continent, I think there's one factor that we need. My apologies. I think there is one aspect that we need to really take note of. Now, according to the World Bank, Africa is the only region in the world with more female than male entrepreneurs. And 1 in 4 African women runs or manages a business, many of these businesses being in the informal sector. But what does this tell us? It tells us that African women in nature are enterprise oriented, and we are business driven, and the numbers show, given the opportunity. However, the challenge is that there's still a really large gap in funding between male entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs. Now, I'd love to pose this question to Ms. Cecile. And for me, it is more about what can Africa learn from the EU with regards to making sure that we help the female founders, because the truth of the matter is economic development on the continent lies heavily on the success of female entrepreneurship. These are the numbers, these are the figures. What can we do to encourage our female founders on the continent and ensure that they're receiving the right support and ensuring that they are receiving mentorship, not just, the accelerators and the incubator programs, as well as even just funding, but what else can we do as a continent to encourage female founders? Ms. Cecile, over to you.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you, Elizabeth, for this very important remark and question. I mean, we are clearly, and sometimes what we don't see, and I concur with what Charles was saying also before about the structure, we hear, at least from our development bank, from the actors that are doing the project, that they don't find this woman entrepreneur. Which, of course, I'm sitting back in Brussels, so it's difficult for me to give like this context or to go on the ground. We are not doing that, but our projects are sometimes saying that they don't find enough in the pipeline. And I think there we can help. I mean, if you can help us to get access to this woman, because clearly in our program we put them as priority. As I say, young people and women would be very much priority. And we face with people telling us, no, but we don't find it. If you help us to find this pipeline, to find this of you, I see some in the room, which is great. But I mean, more than that, to get this access so that it trickles down and we can support this program of women entrepreneurs, that will be for us very, very important. And I think this exchange of pipeline is a very important point. Some of the partners are saying, yeah, we have a huge pipeline. Others say, we don't have a pipeline. Why not sort of exchanging and making, if one of the projects we cannot fund some of you, then we move them into another project. So very concrete suggestions there, but I think something that if we work together, between the different development banks, venture capital, and so on, and exchange this kind of information, we can make the outreach bigger.
I wonder, Elizabeth, if I could just add to that. Very briefly, you made a correct point, Cecile, as well as Elizabeth, that it's found on our continent, women entrepreneurs are more successful, and also the fact that they live longer. You know, the average lifespan of women all over the world, including our continent, is they live much more longer. They have a stronger sense of resilience than men. But the one area I believe which have been taken very, very serious by policymakers, foundations, partner countries, and I know the EU in South Africa is doing that, is the reality that women undergo all sorts of crazy, huge challenges. I think this morning, the very disgraceful femicide statistics was released in South Africa. Now, I think this is not only in South Africa, yeah? I mean, we see this. You know, the first Nobel Peace Prize laureate comes from this province, Chief Albert Luthuli. There's a museum out there in honor of Chief Albert Luthuli. And I think if you go on YouTube, you'll see there was a lecture given in honor of him a few weeks ago by our South African Defense Minister, Thandi Modise. And she made some interesting points of how women in the 1950s and 60s had to engage their communities, and particularly the men within their communities with very bullish patriarchal attitudes. So this issue, I believe, we can't put it under the carpet. You know, we really have to deal with it using our creative capabilities and all the instruments possible at both the human level, the finance level, and at other levels. It's just simply not acceptable that young women entrepreneurs and elderly women get bullied, and there's this, like, you know, like women seem to have it on the forehead that I'm an ATM for you, or whatever, you know, we want to put on the forehead, that it's just not acceptable. I think there's a lot of advances in many parts of the world with more post-patriarchal, post-modern, post-creative approaches in this regard via music, via sports, but the problem remains and persists in an unbelievable way on the continent when you read some of the reports. So I believe, like Charles had mentioned, of an association of startups, also the type of mobilization to deal with this, because it just cannot happen that men believe women are an open book with their crazy agendas in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both Cecile as well as Professor Iqbal once again. I think what you both said is very important. I think one of the challenges, even from an investment perspective, that I've seen with female founders on the continent is that because a larger number of women-owned businesses in Africa are predominantly in the non-tech industries. So we see a lot more women in hospitality, tourism, fashion, and so forth. And even if we look at last year, because as much as well as Africa did with regards to raising funds on the continent in the startup ecosystem, a lot of the businesses or a lot of the founders were tech-based. And very few, received funding in the industries that I've already mentioned, and fashion and so forth. And I think these are the industries that were perhaps most hit by the pandemic. So I think it would be great for us. And you mentioned the idea of, associations and so forth. But I would love to educate you that there's a lot of hubs on the continent that have come together and are working hand in hand across the entire region, where they're sharing ideas, where they are, giving each other information as to what one can do, enrolling into incubator programs. I think that from the startup ecosystem perspective, and I'd love to say this and challenge perhaps the policymakers as well. From the startup ecosystem perspective, there is a lot of activity that's already taking place. Now, I think that my question would be, what then can we do? How can we now engage the policymakers, or how can we get them to the table so we can all sort of be on the same playing field? But thank you both, all of you, for all of your contributions to these questions. Lastly, I'd love to give one more opportunity for Telekumbo Raspberry. You spoke a lot about the resilience and what you have been doing with Telekumbo in Angola. And now Angola is a Lusophone country, which is perhaps some of the challenges that I've seen. What would you say Angola or the ecosystem in Angola needs to do to increase visibility with investors across the region, as well as even internationally?
They will all be gone.
Hello? Hello?
You need to speak a bit so he will pick it up.
Okay.
Hello?
Okay.
Hello? 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 Okay, thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth, for the. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth, for the question. May you kindly please repeat the last segment of your question before I respond? Hello, Elizabeth? Is she there?
Being a part of a system where don't hear enough, what would you say can be done in that area or in that region to increase visibility for people to know more about what is happening in that ecosystem?
Okay. First and foremost, I think we need platforms like this, allowing young Angolan entrepreneurs to come and pitch. I know in South Africa, they've got projects like the Shark Tank they were talking about. This gives the youths the platforms to pitch and be more visible, something that is lacking in Angola. I think it's something that is to be driven by stakeholders like those who have made it in the country, Angola. When I say those who have made it, I mean other entrepreneurs. Because sometimes it takes another entrepreneur to understand the challenges that for those with the ideas that will have been impressed the investors. At the same time, I would also want to say to the youth themselves, this goes for all African. Sometimes you have to hunt for the opportunities to present yourself, even if they are non-existing opportunities in your country. Why I say so? There are other ways of raising funding. Personally, we have tried to link up with prospective investors through LinkedIn. So we have got online platforms these days. We're talking of digital platforms. Whilst others are using them just for social media, as the term social media, you can turn that social media into prospective. We have done this, we've raised the company, everything we have done. So by the time we go and present to them, it's a finished product. So also I want to encourage the youth to, when they pitch their ideas to the prospective investors, they need to make sure that it's a fully functioning finished product. By the time they start hunting, it's not a half-baked product. So in light of what I've said, in short, the youth themselves, they need to position themselves through various platforms. They have to hunt for the linkages, for the strategic alliances to make things happen, even if their country or even if their network is not producing the funders. That's what I would advise. Apart from the fact that other stakeholders in the country can also come and chip in to give the youth the visibility, the platforms they need to thrive.
Thank you very much, Rasbridge. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an opportunity for us to ask the panel speakers any questions that we have. Bulelwa is the lady with the mic. She will go around and pass the mic to you if you would like to ask a question to any of the panel speakers. Please, I would like to remind us to be conscious of our time. Please keep your questions very brief.
Yeah, hello. My name is Kwabena Danso from Ghana, and I'm a manufacturer of bicycles. So I make bicycles out of bamboo, and it's being sold across Europe and North America. My question is, especially to the EU, is about, so the problem we are talking about here is about access to funding. But I think the greater problem is not access to funding, but access to affordable funding for small businesses. Because if you take my country, Ghana, for instance, we have the minimum rate, rate for accessing funds through the banks or something is about 24 to 28. And sometimes you can go up to as high as 32%. And we've had all this funding come around. Like, for instance, we had the World Bank launch this funds in Ghana for green businesses. And we thought, since it's coming from the World Bank, we'll have an exchange rate that was quite lower. The fund came, we went in, they approached us. If you are interested, we started the process, and we found out they were taking about 25% as an interest rate. And it's because World Bank is not actually giving out these funds directly to the entrepreneurs. They are going through third parties. And these third parties also want to mark up to be able to get to be able to cover their costs and all that stuff. EU is the same thing. They don't come direct. They go through governments. They go through other third parties. It's the same thing with the Afro-Asian Bank. How do we make sure small businesses access affordable funding that is able to get them to grow, other than it becoming some kind of a patient capital for these businesses to be able, instead of it becoming more like a stress capital for them in the end, where they find it very difficult paying back and even sometimes crippling their businesses. Thank you.
Your hand up.
It's working. Ah, yeah, now it's working. Okay. Thanks a lot for this comment. Well taken. And I hear what you're saying. This is not a way that SME can get funding if it's 25 or 30%, fully with you. That's what we are trying to do and boost it more. This guarantee I was talking about is exactly to cover the risk that the banks will have. So then they should do better rates because we cover the risk they take. So that should also come part of the business. But I hear what you're saying very much. That's very interesting what you're saying because it's something that we need to work on, very, very much taken into account, and something that we'll try to tackle. But very good that you get this testimony also that will help us quite a lot on this way towards getting more affordable, as you say, products. It's not only getting access to products, but products that SME can go and can afford. That's very important.
a very good question on bicycles, and we all know on our continent and even elsewhere, in many rural areas, bicycles is the Rolls Royce of primary school students, high school students. So in 2012, when I was about to take up my post in Eritrea as South Africa's ambassador there, the mobile phone company called MTN started this project on cycling, where they said they need to pool within Africa. We have some of the top cycling countries, Eritrea, South Africa. There's Dlamini, who participated in the creme de la creme of cycling, the Tour de France, yeah? And what they did is MTN not only funded the first African modern cycling team to compete in 2014 in cycling, but what they also did is they decided to sponsor bicycles in rural areas, in towns like Alexandra, in Johannesburg and other parts of the world. I witnessed this myself. And they went one step further. Like you just mentioned, they decided in the northwest province of South Africa, you'll get all of this information on Twitter under Quebecer Cycling. They decided to set up a bicycle manufacturing plant. So I think that plant would be excited to know more about your project and what way the dots can be connected in whatever way possible. Thank you.
Greetings to the panel. Greetings to everyone that is present in this place. According to your different seats, I greet you all. My name is Mbalent from Eshowe, KZN, South Africa. I don't have a question, rather I have a suggestion and a plea to Mr. Tami. For us, the youth from the rural areas, the tortoise to development is slower than the aeroplane to development compared to those in the urban areas. There are doors that we want to get into. We knock into them, but they're closed. For instance, you will see on social media that a different municipality is offering sponsorship for upcoming youth business people. But when you go into your municipality, for myself, just taking myself for instance, I'm an upcoming farmer. I've got goats, chickens, and layers. It becomes very difficult for me at the end of the day to look for water. It's been over 3 years that in my area we haven't had running water on taps. It becomes very difficult to watch your livestock having to spend the day without having enough water. So it becomes very difficult because if you go into your municipality, they would tell you that yes, we did have water tanks, but we only had 4 and we've already given them to other people. And then the question is, who are those people? Why do we not all deserve to be sponsored? So I just want Mr. Tami to kindly look into the rural developments, the rural areas, and maybe if it's possible to plant people over there that are gonna look specifically into rural development before they look into women development. Because it becomes very difficult. I know that when you start something like this, you need to have yourself first. Yes, we do have ourselves. We do have something that we started with, but it becomes a steep hill, and then that's when you need sponsorship. It's not always that you're gonna have, at the end of the day, you're gonna run out of profits because with every profit that you have, you need to put it into the development. So that's when we need the municipality to come in, the sponsors to come in. So before we look at women development, can we please look into the rural areas because that's where we are. The only time when we get sponsorship is if we come to the big cities like Durban. It becomes very difficult for sponsors from Durban to go down to Eshowe. Yes, it's like 2 hours away, but they would ask you first, where are the sponsors from Eshowe? They are not there. They are there, but they're not there. We can't find them. We knock into their doors. They would tell you, Gamaspala Uguti, bring your proposal, bring your business profile. You will take it there. They will tell you after 2 weeks, Uguti, write a letter to the director or to the municipal manager. You will write it. 2 weeks later, you go there and you inquire. They would tell you, go to municipal manager is in a meeting, sit down and he will attend to you. At 4 a.m., they would tell you, go to he's out the office, he's going to come back some other time. That's the life we're living in the rural areas. And it's a bit of a downfall because we're there, we're expected to be somehow supported and uplifted, but the support is entirely not there.
Hello? Tommy, I think the question was directed to you.
Not sure if my mic is on. Thank you. I don't think necessarily it was a question. It was more of a comment. But I'll just, also in the interest of time, I'll just say that I think what my sister is sharing, because she's sharing in a context of what is happening within some South African rural areas, and one will know that all of us coming from different parts of Africa, Africa has got rural areas, so we'll all experience certain things. So I think the lesson to take is that, as she is putting it, apart from coming up with innovative ways of financing, that finance, as much as it should go direct to financing businesses, but perhaps the governments, the municipalities, the provincial governments like ourselves, and working with somewhere, it could be something else somewhere. But I think it just goes to show that as stakeholders, we need to take a holistic approach in funding SMMEs, not just look at capital funding or operations funding, but making sure that infrastructure is adequately funded. So it's well taken, and it's for all of us, and it's for Africa as a whole. Thank you so much.
Okay. Greetings. My name is Petsile. I'm from Swaziland. I work for an NGO called Junior Achievement. Listening to the concerns of the young people, it seems quite uniform across the continent. And just like what you've said, my brother, what will make the approach more sustainable is working with the stakeholders that are on the ground, and they know the young people by name, they know them by location. They can always be there to monitor them, to mentor them, to coach them throughout the journey. So I would like to understand, I'm not sure if anyone would have an answer, what are the partnership opportunities at Africa level for stakeholders who are on the ground, who are working with the young people? Because like my sister, she's concerned about issues of water. But the truth is, there is a stakeholder that is working in that community, and they need the support so they can support these young people they are with. Thank you.
I think we're going to take one last question. Yeah, because we have to close the session for another session happening. So we need to close the Q&A, and I'll just allow you to have one last question.
Good afternoon. My name is Aliyu Al-Hassan. I'm from Nigeria. I would like to ask the speaker from EU, what specific programs do you have that state governments can key into to support startups in their community? I work for government.
Hello. Oh, okay. I have the mic. Thank you so much. I just want to quickly respond to the question about how do you work with the grassroots. Yeah, I think it's a very important question to ask, because that's where the actual business happens. But the way the architecture at the continental level works is that it's a build-up process. What I mean by that is that Um, for example, the African Union cannot directly go and work with a specific area in a country. Our process is a build-up, so we start with the country level. How organizations like yours organized? If they are not organized, I think it's important to have like-minded organizations come together. When they come together, they have a voice which can then be amplified at the regional level, where you find like-minded organizations from South Africa, Botswana. We are in the SADC region, so I'll just give an example of SADC. To say then the next question is, how are you organized at the SADC level? Then after that, we have 5, 6 regions in Africa. All those regions coming together form an organization at the continental level. So we cascade. We do not really go down directly, but we hear you, and I think the next step is to make sure that we work with our member states to make sure that those national organizations are vibrant. Because if they are vibrant at the national organization, then they'll be able to build up even at the regional level, and then we have a strong representation even at the continental level. And with that, when we have programs, it's easy to cascade down and reach the rural communities through this channel. So I think that's a takeaway for us to see how best we can encourage our governments to have organizations like yours organized from that level. Let me stop there because of time. Thank you.
All of panel speakers, Mr. Lebo Gunguluza, Ambassador Professor Iqbal, Ms. Cecile Bilal, Mr. Robert Sanders, Mr. Rasbridge Moyo, and last but not least, Mr. Tammy Zondi and Mr. Charles. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us in today's session. We do hope that we will see you in the next sessions to come. Thank you. God bless you. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So I'm really happy to see that there's still a lot of energy in the room. I know it's lunchtime now, but I just wanted to give you some clues in terms of what's happening next. So at 2 p.m., the next session will happen. We have Daniel Yu from Soko Watch. Soko Watch is a Kenya-based B2B commerce that has raised $14 million in Series A, and they are now looking, there's going to be, they have a venture fund as well, which will be looking at people like yourselves. Dr. Ola Brown, who founded the medical emergency services platform called Flying Doctors, is also here. She has a portfolio initiative of $350 million. They will be talking through their journeys, and they will also be looking at your propositions. So please have your lunch, be back here at 2 p.m. for what I expect to be quite an engaging discussion. I know they're going to bring up a number of yourselves to join them on stage as well, so that the conversation is two ways. So that promises to be quite exciting. So we'll see you guys dead on 2 p.m. Thanks.
What is the purpose of tonight, my baby? Is my fortune the main act? I need to feel where you at, my baby. Are you ready? Something new. I don't want it to be all the same. Let me take you away. Can you see the light? I guess we find our way. I love to see a smile on your face, it's like a gift. Can you see the light? I guess we find our way.
careful watch of my brother's soul. And should the sky be filled with fire and smoke, keep watching over during sun. This is the end in fire, and we shall all burn together. Watch the flames climb high into the night, calling out, Father, oh, stand by and